Hi, and welcome to Reed's Audio Reading. I'm Reed, and I hope you enjoy my channel. Today, I'll be reading the adventure The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, specifically scenes 10 to 12. This adventure was written by John D. Radcliffe. Scene 10, Hobeys by Night. Dyson and Henwen's alliance with demonic forces has already borne fruit. Not only have they gained the Cuckoo as an ally to assist in their plans and serve as a link to a wider network of demonic spies infiltrating the game world, but their activities have attracted a number of fiendish creatures to the area, the Habeys. Creatures. A pack of 6 Habeys targets the characters for a nighttime ambush. Tactics. A typical Habay attack only occurs at night or in the deep forest in an area where the light is dim from the overhanging foliage. With a spot check DC 23, a character notices movement in the trees, as here and there a Habay flees from their approach, sometimes ducking behind a branch or trunk like a squirrel, keeping the tree between itself and the viewer. That the odd little creature flee may give the PCs false confidence. After all, it's hard to be scared of a small, shy, if odd looking vermint. After a time, though, characters may notice that the Habeys seem to gain confidence. Ones they passed earlier seem to be following behind. They'll hear rustling in the trees and catch quick glimpses of them ducking under cover. Soon there are 3 to 4, then half a dozen or more ahead, behind, and alongside the party. They're staring with wide, unblinking eyes that shine slightly in the gloom. Then suddenly, all 6 Habeys swarm the party, springing from the trees with open maws. They also immediately swarm to target if the characters launch a projectile at them. The Habeys do not fight to the finish but flee en masse if the melee goes against them, melting into the shadows and leaving their hapless targets deep within a dark, pathless forest. Scene 11, The Warlord's Tome. This site has nothing to do with the trouble currently facing the area, but it's almost inevitable that PCs come here on a wild goose chase, seeking to put an end to the horsemen' depredations, to purge the land of the undead, or simply to find some good loot. They'll soon find that this is one wild goose that chases back. The hill before you has a diameter of over 500 feet and rises some 100 feet. As far as you can tell, there's only one entrance. On the west side, a dark tunnel braced by 2 standing stones, a lintel stone between them linking the three into an insert triflon. A short transcription is carved deeply into the lintel stone. The hill is artificial, built centuries ago to honor the fallen war leader. The inscription is in the same runic language, Druidic, as the spells carved on the stone circles, but lacks the magical protection of the inscriptions on the standing stones ringing Ossington. It was meant to be read. A druid, or anyone under the effects of comprehend languages spell, can make out the inscription as simply Synthnar the Warlord. Entry Chamber. Just inside the entrance is a small chamber dominated by a great altar like stone tome. Spiral carvings decorate the walls, floors, and roof. The wall opposite the entrance bears another inscription in the same ancient script. As before, anyone who can read Druidic can make out the ancient inscription. Heart shall be bolder, courage the greater, will the sterner, as our strength lessens. This is a once famous excerpt from the Sainthismal, the contemporary epic poem describing Seithnar, the warlord's successful efforts to repel the invaders threatening his people. This particular stanza represents his speech in the midst of the final battle, admonishing his soldiers to follow his example and fight on, even though mortally wounded by enemy treachery. A bardic knowledge check, DC 25, or a knowledge history or local check, DC 30, can identify the source of the text as well as its significance. There is nothing else of interest within the chamber itself except for the battered remains of a skeleton in mangled chain mail. Tully, if with the party, identifies this as the door warden she slew and whose sword she now carries. The altar tomb is in fact a solid block of stone that serves as an offering table where folk can leave tokens of respect. This occurred until quite recently, in fact, until the townspeople were killed off over the last few months. The undead door warden regularly removed any items of interest and carried them to the warlord deep within the barrow, eventually discarding the rest. The chamber has three secret doors, each of which requires a separate search check to detect, DC 20 for the one in the north wall, DC 25 for the other two. All three secret doors open away from the chamber, and all three are weighted so that they close by themselves if not held or hedged open. The Circle Maze. The entire system of underground passageways was created by building 13 circular walls in concentric circles, linking them up in a complicated maze pattern, and then filling the spaces between with rubble to create the hill above. The maze is particularly treacherous in that the corridors are not laid out with mathematical precision. The flooring is subtly uneven, imperceptibly rising and falling, so that not every passageway is on the same level. Thus, if a character attempts to walk straight to the center of the maze, ethereally, he or she has only a slim chance of coming upon each of the inner corridors. Roll a percentile die 1 to 30 equals too high, the PC passes beneath the target passage. 31 to 60 equals correct, PC encounters target passage. Or 61 to 90 equals too low, the PC passes beneath the target passage, as well as 91 to 100 equals lost. Characters veers to the left or right and loses bearing, emerging at the random point in the maze. It should be clear to any arcane spellcaster that Dimension Door or Teleport is far too hazardous a way to navigate this maze. The druids who built the barrow devised the maze to protect the warlord's resting place from imperious intrusion. His undead servitors could navigate the maze without error, but enemies seeking to pursue him beyond death, a very real possibility at the time, would find him well prepared to defend himself. Knowledge of the correct route was passed down orally within their order, but this knowledge was lost with the death of the last druid some centuries ago. Traps. Sathnar's barrow is protected not just by the maze, but also by many traps placed within it. These essentially take three separate forms as detailed below. Each time the characters pass a point marked on the map with a T, roll a D percentile die and consult the table below. Development. Should the characters retreat from the barrow and return later, they find that 1d3 traps they triggered have been reset by Sithnar's elemental and undead minions per day that has passed. If Sithnar is destroyed, then the barrow's defenses will no longer be repaired and true death will finally come to this place. Creatures. The druids who built the barrows summoned three large earth elementals and charged them with protecting and maintaining the barrow, a task they have faithfully carried out ever since. Each stands a watch of a century before being relieved and replaced by a fresh elemental. Characters encounter each elemental singly, but the type of encounter can vary wildly thanks to the elemental's ability to move through earth and stone. For instance, intruders in the tome sometimes hear a deep, hollow chuckle, apparently coming from the very walls of the tome itself, just before an earthen hand reaches up to slam a character. If the intruders have been particularly entertaining, an earth elemental may come out and play, taking the form of a great granite boulder and rolling down a hall after them. Treat as an overrun, only to merge seamlessly into the far wall instead of hitting it. Creatures. Much like their former master, the warlord's servitors have become undead creatures. However, they do not maintain their master's fair nature. Instead, these wights hunt ceaselessly throughout the barrow for living creatures. A total of 8 of the foul creatures lurk here, though the characters likely encounter only one or two at a given time. Thanks to their ability to hide and move silently, surprise attacks should be common. The Barrow Guardians still wear remnants of once fine chainmail and have rusty swords buckled at their belts, though they use their clawed hands for slam attacks. Stairs down. The innermost 13th circle at the center of the maze is in fact a stone spiral staircase leading counterclockwise down to the actual barrel chamber. The stairs are not trapped. They descend from the level of the built up barrow into a rock cut chamber within the earth itself, Sathnar's burial chamber. Burial chamber. At the heart of the barrow, beneath the level of the maze, lies the warlord's final resting place. The stairs end in a stark stone chamber deep beneath the earth. Archways in the center of each wall lead off into darkness. A swirling spiral pattern, similar to those found in the entry chamber, decorates the walls, and a large stone sarcophagus dominates the room. Abstract battle scenes carved into the sarcophagus appear similar to the style of the figure on the Red Horse Hill. Atop its lid is the stone figure of an armored man lying full length, his hands still clutching the pommel of the great sword that extends all the way to his feet. Creatures. This is Sethanar's tome, but the warlord is not inside it. Instead, he waits quietly in a secret alcove just off the stairs. Discovering the secret door to his hiding place requires a careful search, DC 30, of the right hand wall of the stairway. Otherwise, he waits until the intruders are gathered around his tome before stepping out behind them to demand that they explain why they have come. See development below. If the characters sneak in and immediately begin prying off the lid off the tome, holy symbols at the ready, he does not bother to parley, but simply attacks from behind with surprise, calling forth the two additional wights lurking in the curved passageways behind each archway. Tactics. In life, Sithnar was not only a renowned warrior, but also a reasonable man. Even as an undead, he's willing to listen to explanations and apologizes, but his patience is limited, especially with callow youths who burst into his barrow waving swords around and making threats. To win his respect, a single character must accept his challenge to a one on one duel. The terms of the duel are negotiable, but in essence, it should be a straightforward sword fight without interference from the other PCs or any of Sethnar's guardian minions. The fight need not be to the death. If Sithnar beats the PC, he stops the fight before delivering the killing blow to ask if the PC will yield and acknowledge him the victor. If the PC proves the better, or at least luckier, swordsman, Snithar breaks off the fight and acknowledges his opponent's superior technique. Of course, if there's any cheating on the PC's part, or if his opponent's compatriots join in when their friend is in a tight spot, the warlord concludes that he's facing mere grave robbers after all, and lowers the boom. His two minions emerge from hiding and attack. Development. Assuming the player characters behave honorably, they can gain quite a lot of information from the warlord. The duel over, Snithnar warms noticeably in a manner and asks why they have come. He denies any involvement in the recent events bedeviling the village and willingly submits to any truth-testing spell they might have. While lacking any recent information, he knows about the great battles of the past in which he took part. Woe unto any PC who strongly resembles his foes from those days. Though he wouldn't put it past the elves to start an ethnic cleansing of the forest, he can honestly say that he never heard of them doing so before. They always kept to themselves and didn't bother those who didn't bother them. He has little contact with the villagers anymore. The dead should leave the living in peace. That's why I left the world and came here. But he says that their behavior changed recently. All offerings to his xenopath ceased quite suddenly, and not long afterwards someone destroyed his door warden. He knows nothing about the horseman, but empathically assures the PCs that it's no minion of his and has nothing to do with the Barrow complex. The warlord also knows about the depredations of the dragon Ashardalon, and the steps of the druid Did took the counterbalance them, which might provide the final clue the PCs need to solve the mystery. Or, if they haven't figured out who the bad guy are yet, they may simply file this away as something their friend Dyson will be happy to learn. PCs who depart in friendship from Sithnar have the honor of meeting one of the great men from a time long past. If they make their story known, bards from hundreds of miles in all directions will want to know every detail of how he looked, what he said, his mannerisms, and the like. Descendants of the folk he saved will offer up prayers, and the barrow will once again become a spot for pilgrimages by the historically minded. Treasure. The main treasure here is the warlord's equipment, in particular his sword. His armor is of good quality, masterwork, but not enchanted. Of his other treasures, only his brooch of shielding survived the battle that took his life. Scene 12. The Fae's Last Stand. At some point, the characters and the Fey skirmishers may have a final reckoning. Depending on a character's actions, this scene could come at almost any point in the second half of the adventure. Whatever the lead in, the Fae become determined to wreak vengeance upon the PCs for all the horrors visited upon the Fae during the past few months. This is an exceptionally difficult encounter and should only occur as the climax of the PC's delving into the forest. It's designed to bring a sense of closure that only comes with a knockdown drag out fight with a formerly elusive opponent. Creatures. All remaining members of the skirmish squad, Yelis the arcane archer, Zarn the ranger, Thalvara the sorcerer and her familiar, Vesley the pixie, and Gnarlroot the Trent, take part creating a combat that promises to be particularly deadly. The PCs may have whittled down the skirmishers' numbers in a previous encounters, though, as noted before, these opponents take pains to avoid direct contact. Tactics. This is the skirmishers' last hope of eliminating those who have perceived to be the allies, perhaps even hired mercenaries, of the villagers. They don't pull any punches and they fight to the death. Vesley begins to ambush by firing a sleep arrow at the unarmored or lightly armored PC. Thanks to his invisibility, he has a +2 bonus to any attack roll, and his target loses any dexterity bonus to AC. He has only 3 of these arrows left after his attack, so he uses them sparingly. Other tactics include a ready dispel magic to counterspell a PC's spell, entangle on a group of PCs, or a confusion touch. At the same time, the 2 trees that Gnarlroot has already animated attack, preferably in flanking positions around the armored characters. If the PCs turn the tide of battle against the skirmishers, he enters the fray personally, coming from behind the characters. Zarn spends each round readying an arrow to attack anyone who appears to be casting a spell. A hit forces the spellcaster to make a concentration check, DC 10 to damage dealt plus spell level. He also remains mobile, trying to avoid being pinned down. Thelvara summons 1d3 fiendish hawks, then casts Enlarge upon her familiar, granting it a +2 enlargement bonus to strength, and sends it into battle. Yelis adjusts her strategy as appropriate, trying to prevent the PCs from gaining the upper hand. If the character's spellcasting power proves to be great, she targets spellcasting PCs. If one or more characters move into the forest to find opponents, she peppers them with arrows while staying out of reach. The forest environment also affects the battle. The moderate undergrowth reduces movement to 3/4 normal. Anyone in the forest has at least 1/4 concealment, 10% mischance, at all times, and cover is easy to find. Of course, a PC who hunkers down to avoid arrow shots becomes a prime target for the animated trees, and the pixie is mobile enough to make most cover useless. As noted before, the skirmishers pointedly ignore any PC attempts at a parlay. They've fallen for that trick before. Should the PCs go out of their way to prove their innocence, such as letting a wounded skirmisher escape, the pixie uses detect thoughts to probe for the character's true motivations. If he finds no true malice, he tries to convince Yelis and the others to stand down. This is probably the PC's only chance for a peaceable conclusion. Otherwise, the battle ends when only one side remains standing. If the skirmishers are defeated, the village won't have any more trouble. Should the PCs lose, the skirmishers hang the PCs' dead, looted bodies from a tall tree near the village as a warning. Ad hoc's XP adjustment. Due to the formidable situation provided, forced ambush against unprepared PCs, this encounter should be awarded 150% of the normal XP. The encounter level has been raised by +1 to represent this difficulty. Thank you for listening to this audio reading of The Standing Stone 3rd Edition, scenes 10 to 12. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day. Best regards, Reed.